This tutorial demonstrates how to add an asset to service logic. It covers asset categorization for maintenance, creation of a cycle type containing cycle steps, selection rules and hierarchies, and generation of PM schedules. Once the asset is configured and managed by service logic, we show how to adjust its service schedule. Let's start with asset categories. Select Maintain Equipment Extension Attributes from the wrap Service Logic menu in JD Edwards. Note that throughout this tutorial, the navigation bar will show you how to find each of the forms used. Select the asset to be added to Service Logic and choose the Maintain Records row exit. In this form, you configure the required categories and extended categories that apply to the asset. The category codes will be used to determine the asset's maintenance requirements. For my system, Extended Category 2 is used to specify the engine type. I'm selecting diesel for this asset. That's going to affect the service types that will be assigned to this asset by service logic. You can set many other categories on the asset as well. Once all the required categories are set, click the OK button to save your changes. Next, we'll create a cycle type. It's worth noting that a single cycle type definition can be used by many different assets. The cycle type is able to contain and manage the cycle steps of any number of assets that are following the same pattern of services. This doesn't mean the assets are serviced together. Whilst the pattern is the same, the intervals and calendar dates can be different. To add a new cycle type, select Maintain Wraps Cycle Types from the Wraps menu. Click the Add button and enter the requested details. Firstly, a name for the cycle type, a description, company if company row security is required, and for the rescheduling method, I'm entering 1, which specifies that if the planned date for a cycle step is changed, service logic should adjust all of the cycle's other steps in order to maintain service intervals. The steps can be adjusted to be earlier or later, and note there are several other rescheduling methods that affect how a cycle will be managed. Each adds extra restrictions that limit which steps can be adjusted and by how much. More information about rescheduling methods is provided in the online Knowledge Garden. A link is provided at the end of this tutorial. Lastly, let's enter a default step increment of 250 service hours and save the changes. Now we'll add some steps to the new cycle type. To add a new cycle step, select Maintain Wraps Cycle Types from the Wraps menu. Select the cycle type that we just created and choose the Cycle Steps row exit. Click the first row in the grid and enter the step number, required service, effective dates, and the step increment. Here are some example values. They represent a standard 4-step service cycle with 250 hours between steps. You can see that step 1 and step 3 are performing the same service type. For each cycle step that you configure, Service Logic will create and manage a PM schedule in JDE. These PM schedules are automatically updated whenever the planned time for a cycle step is adjusted. An adjustment to one step in the cycle could result in updates to all of the PM schedules in the same cycle. Select the Service Defaults row exit for each step to configure its service type level. This is a priority setting between 0 and 9, 9 being the highest priority. Let's specify 1 for the 250-hour service type because I want it to be a relatively low priority service that can be brought forward or delayed without any restrictions. Cycle type selection rules are the rules that determine which cycle types will apply to the asset. To configure these rules, select Maintain Wraps Hierarchy from the Wraps menu. Click on the Selection Rules button. You can see the list of rules, each specifying a cycle type that will either be added or removed based on the attributes defined for the rule. New cycle type selection rules can be added at the bottom of the grid. If the grid contains multiple pages, you'll need to advance to the last page to see the bottom of the grid. Let's add a rule that says, add my new cycle type to assets from company 200, and scrolling to the right, we'll specify an extra condition, that the asset must have been categorized with a diesel engine. Other conditions can also be added to limit the assets which the cycle type should be applied to. Now click OK to save the rule. Model work order selection rules determine which model work order will be chosen for a particular asset and service type. To add a new model work order selection rule, select Maintain Wraps Hierarchy from the Wraps menu. Click on the Model Work Order Rules button. If the grid contains multiple pages, advance to the last page. New model work order selection rules can be added at the bottom of the grid. Enter the rule configuration details, the service type, work order, and asset attributes to be matched. For my cycle type's 250-hour service, I'm specifying model work order 475612, and I'll add in the diesel engine category. This maintenance procedure will now be used for any asset that matches these settings, but of course I could limit it to only a certain product family, model, or even a specific asset if I wanted. Click the OK button to save the changes. The next step involves configuring hierarchies that determine which set of attributes will be used to match an asset to its selection rules. As we saw earlier, the selection rules will define the cycle types and model work orders that apply to an asset. The recommended practice is to define only one applicable cycle type hierarchy and one applicable model work order hierarchy per company. Select Maintain Wraps Hierarchy from the Wraps menu. Here is an example of a cycle type hierarchy that has already been configured. Each grid record in the hierarchy represents a combination of asset attributes that will be used to match selection rules to an asset. Specifically, where an attribute is set to yes, the asset's attribute will need to match the selection rules attribute. As an example, if the category code that specifies an asset's engine type is set to yes in a hierarchy row, then an asset and selection rule that both specify diesel would achieve a match for that attribute. Note that a match is required for all of the yes attributes within a row. The process of searching the selection rules begins with the hierarchy record that has the lowest sequence number. If a match is found using that attribute combination, then the next hierarchy record in sequence number order will be tried. The process continues whilst a match is found, the final match defining the combination that will be used. For cycle type hierarchies, you want your lower sequence number records to represent the more general cycle types, usually requiring less matching attributes, and the higher sequence numbers to represent the more specific cycle types, requiring more precise matching. This is because searching continues whilst a match is found. For model work order hierarchies, the opposite is true. You want your lower sequence number records to define the most specific work orders, containing details that are focused closely on the particular asset being serviced. This is because the searching stops as soon as a match is found. Higher sequence numbers can therefore refer to more general work order instructions, the last record in the sequence often acting as a catch-all. When entering new rows in a hierarchy, enter yes where required, and the other attributes will default to no automatically. The final step in the configuration process is to submit the asset to be managed by Wraps. To do this, select Generate PM Schedule from the Wraps menu. The asset unit number can be specified in the data selection. And click Submit. This operation will launch a batch job that will process the newly configured cycle type for the asset. Once the batch job completes, the newly added asset will be managed by Wraps instead of the standard JDE Enterprise 1 processes. If you need to adjust the schedule for a cycle, select Manage Cycle Steps from the Wraps menu. Select the cycle step to be changed, making sure that it's the one corresponding to your asset, and then choose the Manage Cycle row exit. The cycle schedule can be adjusted by entering new meter values. If required, the current active step can also be changed using the Set to Current row exit. So to summarise the configuration steps that we just completed, we firstly categorised the asset using the standard and extended categories for the asset. We then created a cycle type to model the asset's service cycle. We added 4 steps to the cycle and configured their priorities. We added selection rules used to generate the list of services required for our asset. We also configured rules to select a model work order for servicing our asset. We created hierarchies that prioritise the attribute combinations that should be used to match selection rules and model work orders to our asset. And lastly, we generated PM schedules for our asset so that its preventative maintenance schedule will now be managed by Service Logic. That completes this Service Logic configuration tutorial. If you'd like to discuss how Service Logic can optimise preventative maintenance in your business, get in touch via renami.com.